Hello, I'm Jim Brown, the Director of Educational Support Services at the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, or MIEMSS, and I'm honored to present Mustafa Sidik, who serves as the Infectious Disease Program Coordinator for MIEMSS. Additionally, he serves as adjunct faculty for the paramedic program at Harford Community College. He also continues to serve as a volunteer paramedic for the Arbutus Volunteer Fire Department and the Joppa Magnolia Volunteer Fire Company. Mustafa is staunchly passionate about EMS education, believing that an evidence-based EMS education rooted in fundamental physiological and pathological concepts is key to elevating EMS clinician practice and improving patient outcomes. Again, I'm honored to introduce Mustafa Sidik as he presents Pass the Sanitizer. Will ya?
Hi everyone, Mustafa Sidik here. I'm the Infectious Disease Coordinator for MIEMSS. Thank you for joining me today. So when I was asked to do this topic, and along with all the transitions and delay of the conference with COVID, I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about something that's pretty relevant and up and coming. So today is, for me, I'm recording on August 25th. When the conference comes around, I imagine that there will be a lot more information out on variants. However, I think the information that we're going to be talking about today is going to provide some useful background information because it will give some foundational tidbits for the buzzwords you may or may not be hearing from the news or other media. So let's get to it. As I said, we're going to talk about some infectious diseases basics, and then specifically we'll start talking about how these variants come about. We'll talk about what a mutation is, and various other aspects of things that are kind of the foundational knowledge and the basically the infrastructure that makes us who we are. And then afterwards, at the end of it, we'll talk about some practical ways to protect not only yourself, but your family, your colleagues, and the citizens that you care for. So a lot of folks, I imagine, are wondering this. I know many are asking it. I'm vaccinated. Why should I have to wear a mask again? And that's a fair question. When the vaccines came out, we were, a lot of folks thought that was the end of all this. And it's very fair to ask, what changed? That's part of what the goal is for this presentation. By the end of this presentation, I want everyone to be able to at least take home why masks are being recommended again, and in general, why the response is, ramping back up.
It's a dinosaur.
One of my favorite movies was Jurassic Park, and I would imagine that if some of you remember the movie, one of the core aspects of the movie was the dino DNA and how they had to use pieces of frog DNA to complete what they didn't have. We kind of hear about DNA, and maybe you've heard about RNA because of the mRNA vaccines. This is the first topic that I want to talk about. Back to the basics discussion of what DNA is, what RNA is, what proteins are, and why they are relevant to not only our basic understanding of knowledge, but the virus and the COVID-19 pandemic. The story of life is our information is coded in DNA. That DNA, if you look at the smallest unit of life, it's a single cell. Within that single cell, you have a structure in the middle called the nucleus that houses the most important information to that cell, and that's the DNA. The DNA is coupled by the nuclear envelope that basically think of it as the 100-foot tall wall that is protecting it and not allowing a lot of things to go in and not allowing a lot of things to go out. The problem is the cell needs that information to function. And we're going to be getting to an analogy here in a bit that better describes what I'm talking about here. So if the technical stuff gets a little bit too deep, just bear with me. What happens is the DNA has information that it needs to get out. The cell has these organelles, and organelles are just, think organs but for cells. There's organelles called ribosomes that are basically protein factories being the workhorses of life, things we need critically to live and maintain homeostasis. But how does the cell fix the problem of getting the information that's needed to the parts of the cell that need to know it and need it to function? That's where RNA comes in. Messenger RNA is transcribed, key term there, and holds the information that is needed, passes through out of the nucleus and out to the cytoplasm, the soupy stuff that has ribosomes that then perform their work. The ribosomes then code for whatever protein is needed, and those are either kept in the cell or taken out of the cell, or a myriad of other possibilities. We kind of went through a pretty technical topic there. Let's use a little bit of a different analogy. Say you are the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and you all are doing great. You have a product that has done very well for your company. You have a significant portion of the market share dedicated. You have dedicated customers. And one of the core parts of your operation is that recipe. Now, naturally, that recipe would be kept top secret. You and a core group of your team members may be the only ones that have knowledge of that recipe. Now, why does that pose a problem? If you keep it too secure, the factory and the supply process that you have and the development process that you have, production I should say, doesn't move forward and you don't make any money. The product can't be shipped out to customers, or to stores I should say, that then sell to customers, and your cycle of profit doesn't exactly work. The solution is to have designated folks have a piece of information that's locked down, sent to the factory, which in our case, it would be the ribosomes, and then that factory processes whatever product you have and sends it out to production and sends it out to sale. In our scenario, just replace that top secret recipe with the DNA, right? And all the security and all of the redundant processes to not allow a leak of that information. There are similar processes that are in the cell. So hopefully that helped explain the more technical first explanation that I gave. You're probably asking, why does this matter to a COVID-19 conversation? Viruses are not considered living organisms. That is because they can't survive on their own. The whole reason they're infectious is because they need to invade hosts and hijack their cellular machinery. Think about that factory, that picture on the left. Everything in this section, everything on the left, they don't have that system. All they have is a piece of RNA, which basically all they have is the RNA that basically codes for whatever genetic information they have. They don't even have DNA. So what happens is they come in, they hijack the cellular machinery of their host, and they use that to replicate, and they infect enough, and then the goal is to then get out and infect someone else. Sometimes, though, that transcription process that I was talking about, technically this would be translation process, isn't perfect, and mistakes can happen. When mistakes happen, mutations can occur. And what do I mean by mutations? Nope, not talking about the X-Men mutants. I'm talking about the genetic code that we are all coded in. So going back to what we were talking about in the factory scenario, what can happen is if the top secret information is sent to the factory, but that information has a slight change in directions, the factory is just going to continue to make stuff. If the directions are given are slightly wrong, they'll have slightly wrong products. But if those products, while still incorrect, provide an advantage to the organism, those can change the game in terms of our response and what effect the variant has on the population that is affected by the virus. So at the time of discussion, these are some of the common or the more prevalent variants. I won't take the time to read all of them. Of course, everyone has heard of the Delta variant. A few others that are of concern right now are the Lambda and Epsilon variants. I imagine that by the time this presentation is actually presented, there'll be more information out about those variants. Now, I've painted a pretty grim picture here, so the solution, how do we fix this? How do we stop the variants from occurring? Just get vaccinated, right? And what do I mean by that? We need a majority of the population to get vaccinated. Why is that the case, though? Let's break it down. The only way to stop variants from developing is to stop variants from infecting other hosts, because then you don't have those mistakes in translation that cause mutants to come up in the first place. The best way to prevent viral reproduction is to get vaccinated, because then the virus never gets an opportunity to even get to that stage because your body's already killed it off. A quick note on vaccines. So the RNA vaccines, so Pfizer and Moderna, what they do is, going back to that cellular machinery we were talking about, they utilize the ribosomes, and the vaccine is actually a set of directions that give the ribosomes, the protein factories, directions to make the spike proteins that is on the COVID virus. Once those proteins are made, your body recognizes them and builds that immunity. Of absolutely particular and really important note is the following. The RNA does not affect your own DNA. It's not changing your DNA at all. That's been one of the myths out there. It doesn't penetrate that nuclear wall that we were talking about, the nuclear membrane. It's literally just taking the machinery already found in your cells and utilizing it to make a protein that is found on COVID, thus giving a target for your body's immune system. It then allows your body to build a memory against the COVID virus, so that when it is actually presented with the entirety of the virus through as a pathogen, your body already has the artillery and the arsenal to mitigate it. The Johnson & Johnson, instead of using mRNA, it uses a disabled adenovirus to then provide that information for the body to build that memory. One of the biggest myths that I've also found there is that I've found to be pretty prevalent is the vaccine does not work on variants. I can't stress enough, that is incorrect. By and large, and this was in a New England Journal of Medicine paper that was pretty recent to today's date. COVID-19 vaccination against COVID-19 decreases the risk of being hospitalized for COVID-19. It decreases the risk of being admitted to an intensive care unit, and also it decreases the risk of having symptomatic cases. This is critical here, folks. If you hear people sharing this misinformation, it's they have to know what the actual reality is, because they may not have been given the correct information. Overall, though, it is critical that we still follow the infectious diseases basics. make sure you're washing your hands, make sure you're doing the basic disinfection procedures. Of course, the cornerstone of engineering controls and administrative controls, so things like making sure that your ambulance exhaust is on and working appropriately, administrative controls like social distancing. All of these things create a model where we are reducing the risk as much as possible, so that when we introduce vaccination and other practices, we are doing the best we can to mitigate the pandemic and the virus that is causing a lot of our issues. That being said, real quick, I just want to talk about the general information, and if folks have doubt, I can't stress enough that it's okay to ask questions. The way I think about it, when I take my car to the shop, I'm not a mechanic. I don't know what I don't know. The appropriate thing to do is to ask the content expert, right? The mechanic or multiple mechanics or whatever you feel comfortable with, to ask them your question, get their perspective. It's absolutely okay to have doubt and ask questions, but what I would say, it is not okay to remain in that ignorance, and worse, if you spread bad information, because that's dangerous, right? Especially for us in public safety. The information that we spread can directly affect the citizens that we are serving, right? I can only stress that when you get your information, please make sure that it's from a valid source. And for me personally, the information, it has to come from various sources, and it has to match, various proven sources that are the content experts. And once I base my information, then I'm, continuously reviewing it to make sure that I have the best possible information that I can have. That was just a quick note on that. I know a lot of folks feel, intimidated to ask questions, and that should never be the case. It's okay to ask questions. It's just not okay to remain in ignorance, or worse, spread that spread that incorrect information. A quick note on the flu. So best to get vaccinated in September, October. Flu has not gone away. I know that last year's COVID restrictions prevented a lot of, serious flu waves in many areas, but the influenza is still out there. September, October is the best time period to get vaccinated, and you can get vaccinated all the way into January. I know that I've already talked a lot about infectious diseases, and I imagine at least some folks have glossed over, but I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. And I really hope this gave some practical information that is useful, and that you can give this information to your peers, your colleagues, your family, and maybe the next time there's a little bit of bad information that you hear, you'll be able to provide an answer as to the actual tangible why. So just to summarize, coronaviruses are made of RNA, right? And when viruses replicate, they hijack the cellular machinery of the host that they've infected to reproduce. And then within that reproduction process, sometimes there's mutations or changes in the underlying code, the directions that are provided to the factories, the ribosomes, and that can create variants. Those variants may be, there may be no change to how infectious they are and how deadly they are, or sometimes there can be mutations or changes that make it a lot more deadly. So, to stop the development of variants, it's critical that as many folks as we can get vaccinated, and of course, along with the vaccination, continue to practice the baseline infection control practices that are what you all utilize each and every day. I really appreciate your time today. Any feedback, please don't hesitate. Reach out to me. Feedback, questions. My email and my phone number are actually at the bottom left. Again, I really can't stress. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. I appreciate everyone, all the work that you do. I'm very proud to be part of the MIEMSS team. We've been able to do a lot of tremendous work. The picture on the top left is part of our initiative to vaccinate international mariners. It's been a really good experience in tragic circumstances, but a very good experience. And we're here for you. And if any questions at all, I'm happy to chat with you. Just send me an email, and if I don't know the answer, we'll try to track down someone who does. Thank you very much. That's all for now.